Hello, my name is Jeff Stauffer, Community Relations Director with Elville and Associates, and welcome to our webinar today, our monthly wellness series webinar titled Relationship Changes in Retirement. I'd like to welcome back our guest presenters, Ms. Ellen Platt of the Option Group and Dr. Michelle Fritsch of Retirement Wellness Strategies. So all attendees on today's webinar will be unmuted throughout the presentation, so please feel free to let your voice be heard using your microphone at any time. We want this to be as interactive as possible and allow for plenty of discussion. You can also still post your feedback through the questions panel and chat feature located on your screen. Also, you receive the presentation slides by email on Friday for your convenience to take notes on it if you wish. The slides are also located in the handout section in the panel on the right-hand portion of your screen to download at this time. Everyone will also receive a post-webinar feedback email right after the presentation, and we ask that you take just a minute or two to fill out this very quick survey to offer us your feedback and thoughts about the presentation. And as always, we read and value every comment. Here at Elville & Associates, we work every day with families, with clients, with the ideals of client education, collaboration, and compassion in mind. We're always available for consultations to discuss your family's planning needs and look forward to being a resource to you now and in the future. So at this time, I'd like to welcome back and turn the webinar over to our presenters, Ellen and Michelle, who will share a little bit about themselves and get this webinar started. So thanks very much for being here. As always, Michelle and Ellen, I'll turn it over to you.
Thank you, Jeff. And is this a good time for our poll, or should we do that?
Yeah. Thank you so much. Sorry about that. We were just talking about that. We're gonna start off with a brief poll, and I'm gonna start it right now. And the question we have for you today is, thank you for coming today. Which of these best reflects your primary relationship? I'm gonna launch that poll right now. And the options are, number 1, your spouse, number 2, a significant other, number 3, a child or children, number 4, best friends or friend, and number 5, I don't really have one. So make the choice that best suits your situation. We appreciate you participating.
We do appreciate you helping us with this poll, because some of our remarks, we can make them pertinent to most of the people that are here, and make sure that you walk away with things that you can apply right away, because that's always our goal, that this is truly meaningful for you.
We'll give it another 10 seconds or so. Okay, we've got about 80% of people on having cast their vote, and we have 22% saying their spouse, 22% saying a significant other, 44% saying a child or children, 33% saying best friends, and 0 saying I don't really have one. So thanks for participating, and we'll go ahead and turn it over to Michelle and Ellen.
Thank you all for participating in that. And as always, we love it when you talk to us. So we invite you to share your views, ask your questions anytime. And we'll be asking you a few questions as well. So today we're talking about relationships, and let us introduce ourselves real quick. Go ahead, Ellen.
I'm Ellen Platt with the Option Group. I do case management and advocacy. We help folks navigate longevity, whatever that looks like for them. And everybody's kind of in a different situation. Might be living independently in a home, might be looking at care options, and we help them navigate that. But in the work that we do, we see lots and lots of shifts in relationships. There's a lot of dynamics with the family members or the adult children trying to decide what's going on with mom and dad. There's people who are retiring and realizing that their support network is changing because they're no longer going to work and seeing friends every day. And so there's lots and lots of dynamics that we see, and we're going to talk about some of that today. So welcome and thank you for being here. Michelle?
Thank you, Ellen. Yeah, the same thing. I work with people around the time of their transition to retirement because with all of my years in healthcare, I found that a lot of people struggle with that transition and their health declines rapidly for completely preventable reasons. And one of those has to do with relationships. So we're so glad, Jeff, that you invited us to come and talk about this really important topic. And Ellen and I together have formed Propel Comprehensive Wellness, and we'll tell you a little bit more about that at the end. But we provide you with a guide to navigate these things that tend to lead to decline that's completely preventable. So we're all about that prevention. Now, last month, if you were with us, we talked about gratitude, and it was a great time to do that. We were right in the middle of the holiday season. So does anybody want to share via the chat or just come on the microphone and talk to us? Was that helpful? Have you incorporated gratitude in your life in any new and different ways?
I can tell you something that I did recently. I had a birthday recently, and I was just inundated with happy birthday texts and emails and cards, and it was just really nice. And I thought about each and every person that wished me well, and I was very grateful for that.
That's a great example. Jeff, anything in the chat?
No, not yet. I'm
All
sure
right.
that people will warm up here in a minute.
Yeah, we do love it when you interact with us. But let's move on a little bit. What drew you to this topic? Especially if there are specific questions or ideas that you're hoping to get from our discussion today, please tell us because we can make sure that we give that topic some extra emphasis. I would tell you, Ellen and I, with our regular work, kind of see this at different phases. I tend to work with people as they're nearing retirement and maybe don't realize just how much relationships are impacted by no longer being in the workplace and now being home and doing more local things more than before. So I see it on that planning and sometimes people being very surprised when they get to retirement. And then Ellen, you tend to see it a little bit later when people realize maybe that relationships are not what they thought they were going to be, and then that's impacted life. Is that something you want to speak to?
Yeah, sure. When we get see a lot of the people that we're working with, they have gone through retirement, and what we find is people over time have become very isolated. They didn't have their work group. The children are getting older or have kids of their own and are extremely busy lives, so they don't see them as frequently as they used to. They also you know, their peers are passing or moving on to facilities where they're no longer able to visit them, or they move to another state to be near their children. And we see that people's just their relationships and the dynamics are changing. We also see as people start to decline cognitively, the roles start reversing, the children and the adults. So even though the adult may still think they're the adult and those are the kids are taking on that caregiving role and taking care of their parents like they used to. So, you know, relationships are changing all over the place, and it gets sometimes confusing, especially if somebody has that cognitive decline, but it can we see it lead to isolation and depression and anxiety because people don't feel like they have that support network that they were used to having before.
That is such a good point. Literally right before getting on this call, I was on a phone call with somebody expressing that exact scenario. Been in the hospital. Yeah, go ahead.
I'm sorry, go ahead.
But been in the hospital, now going back home, going to need some extra support. Unfortunately, spouse died within the last year and just not sure where that support's going to come from.
So we have a comment going back to the gratitude piece that you mentioned at the very beginning. have somebody that said, I wrote a note to my husband's 92-year-old aunt thanking her for her phone calls and took my cousin to lunch for her support during my sister's illness.
Oh, beautiful.
Yeah.
And that you were able to do it while they were still here to receive the gratitude.
That timeliness piece is important. You know, I can put things off a little too long sometimes. So let people know how grateful you are at the time that you're grateful. Retirement is a major life transition, and I find sometimes people just think that they're going to waltz into it, no planning required, and they don't tend to have the outcomes that are as good as the people that take the time to really prepare and recognize what's going to be important and what changes are coming that they need to be aware of. So I'm glad you're here. It means that you are taking that more proactive approach and thinking about, well, what are the things that need to be on my checklist as I approach this life transition? And I just kind of mentioned it, but change, no matter, even if it's excellent change can be stressful. And Ellen, this was a great point that you had brought up as we were preparing this presentation. Do you want to speak to this?
Yeah, we were talking about the different kinds of stress. I mean, change is stress, and there's lots of changes that are really positive. And that might be a move to a new home. It might be a change in a job, might be birth of a child or a grandchild, or possibly a marriage. And all those things are positive changes most of the time. But nonetheless, it creates some stress because it is, gets hectic, and lots of decisions to be made, lots of things that we're not used to. And, people get a little bit anxious when there's a little bit of unknown. So, any kind of stress means change, and it's just managing that stress, managing that change, looking at the positive, finding that gratitude, but also using that stress as a catalyst for action and empowerment to be able to get through that phase of transition.
Great points. So when we retire, a lot of things are impacted. One that I will tell you that I work with people on the most is that identifying who they are. If you identified yourself according to your job, you're the manager of this, so you're the provider of that. Who are you as a person when the job ends? And so we spend a lot of time through Propel, and when I work with people one-on-one, we spend a lot of time on this one. And a key answer to that is knowing purpose. And we've had whole webinars on this. But each phase of our life, we've got a purpose. We just have to uncover it and figure out how to really live within it. But when that happens, then that self-identity and self-esteem usually goes with it. Financial changes. And a lot of times when people think about retirement planning, they're focused on the finances, and that is certainly an important part. But we've found that if all you focus on are the finances, all the money in the world can't necessarily help you with these other things if they haven't been addressed. So then we get into the relationships of people at home, the changes that occur with relationships in the workplace. I'll stop there for a second. Anything in the chat or anything you want to add, Ellen?
Just adding to some of those relationship changes, maybe not only relationships at home, but be creating that fabric underneath you so that you have that safety net or that psychosocial support. And even people at home, absolutely very important, but maybe even community. And kind of back to what we talked about a couple of sessions ago with purpose is finding a purpose, maybe volunteering, maybe mentoring somebody, finding ways that we're relevant still, using our skills or using our interests or hobbies or abilities and sharing them or teaching them to others. So that's a great way to create a support network of people who maybe even have similar interests. We also have faith-based, our faith communities can be very important to us to provide that added support. So think not only like within our little nucleus of our family or our home, but also think out into the larger community.
That's a great point. I think the other piece of purpose is what bothers you? What's going on that you're like, oh, somebody needs to fix that, that you care about enough that you want to be part of the solution. I've seen so many people kind of find their purpose and find people that share that passion. And then that's kind of what they pour themselves into, to the betterment of everybody. This next one is role changes. When you're home, then a lot of things can change as to who's cooking, who's cleaning, who's fixing the car, who's fixing up the house, who's going to paint the bathroom. All of those things that come up might change once somebody is no longer in their primary occupation. I have to tell you, I wish I had thought to put this cartoon in here, but I saw a cartoon recently where the man has a clipboard and the woman is cleaning the house, and he says something about, I've been studying for the last 2 days and I see room to improve the efficiency in our household by 23%. And at the bottom it said, and this explains the rising divorce rate. Well, I thought it was a funny cartoon. But anticipating role changes, someone who is a great mentor to me, when he had been retired, it was that first week, you know, that just feels so awkward. His wife was cooking and asked him to get something out of the refrigerator, and he just kind of went ballistic, just feeling like his role had changed significantly. So taking time to think about this ahead of time and have some communication and planning can make a big difference. Sometimes we have unexpected losses. That can be loss of people. It can be people that pass or people that move away. Maybe you were planning a lot of time with your kids and suddenly one of them got a job that took them outside of the state. So having a flexible plan so that if things don't go exactly as you want them to, that you're still okay and that you still have that great set of relationships around you. Changes in your time. If you're not going to work every day, then what do you do with that time? How do you make the most of it? And you've got these personal freedoms now. So what can you do with those? Any thoughts from anybody?
Not right now, Michelle. We have a quiet group today so far.
We would love to hear from you. Again, Ellen, this was something that you had talked about us putting in here. I think it's so important. Do you want to explain kind of what we were trying to say in this slide?
Oh gosh, I think
I can speak to it if you want.
Go ahead.
Because sometimes people feel like they're moving from their career, which is where they wanted to be. They've given it sometimes decades of their life. They knew what they were doing there. It felt comfortable. They felt successful there. And they might feel like, oh gosh, retirement is going to be lousy. I'm no longer doing what I want to do. I'm no longer doing what I feel called to do. And so this slide was just to say, without planning, it can feel like you've given up all the good stuff and now you're left with only bad stuff.
Yeah.
But with planning, that next phase can be just as or even more exciting and fulfilling than the career phase.
And we do see people feel like they're having a second career almost, whether it is a paid vocation or not, but they find their way to something that's a little more satisfying. But it does take a little bit of work, a little bit of research, and some effort. And that's, a lot of people think I'm going to retire and I'm going to kick back and just enjoy everything. And it doesn't always happen that way. It's one of those unexpected things with retirement. They think it's just going to happen. It really needs some effort.
Yeah, it is certainly better with effort. Go ahead, Jeff. I'm sorry.
We have a question from the group. Says after retirement, sometimes it is hard to join groups that have already been together for years and you're the newcomer. Any tips?
That's a good point. Hopefully those groups are wanting to grow and expand and have new people. And if not, maybe I see people starting new groups all the time through Meetup and other things that maybe if like there's a generation that's already been doing this for a while and you're sort of in the next cohort, maybe you could replicate or find your own peers to do something that's similar. I know that sounds like more effort, but if you are feeling like you're not fitting into that group, I would imagine there are others feeling the same way that would want to align with you.
And a lot of time that awkwardness, I mean, think back to middle school and remember those awkward, you felt out of place. A lot of it is really about insecurity of the people that you're with, that they need those people to stick with and they don't want to step outside of their circle. And it really, as hard as it really is not about you. And a lot of people don't realize that or really internalize that they've been left alone. The other thing is find one person that maybe has a similar interest and is willing to go with you. So you have a kind of a friend to go in with and break the ice. And a lot of times just come with some open-ended questions that you can talk to somebody about and kind of break the ice once you get there.
It's a great thought. Take the buddy. That always makes it feel better. There are several things that change if there's a primary person that's in the house with you, a spouse, a partner, somebody else that's living there. One of those is when sometimes one retires and the other one is still working. Have you talked about what that's going to look like and what is the timeline until the other person retires and how's that going to shift household duties and functions and expectations? Maybe plans have changed. You always thought that upon retirement, we're going to do certain things. And now because of COVID or finances or changes in family dynamics or whatever, that has changed. And if so, have you talked about that? I will stop for a second and tell a story. There was a couple that had talked a long time that when they retired, they were going to travel and like big trips. Europe, 3 weeks, a month, 2 months at a time. And she retired first, and he kept putting off his retirement. And in the meantime, their daughter had the first grandchild. And so the woman became the caregiver for the child during the week. And so when the man retired, they no longer had full weeks or months that they could travel without leaving their daughter in the lurch without a caregiver. And so decisions had been made, commitments had been made that really altered their future travel plans. And they still did fun things, but they were now weekend events rather than a month in Europe kind of thing. Do your desires for the future align? Sometimes, when we're young and in love and getting married, we talk about the future and what we want it to look like, and then we get busy. We have kids, we have careers, there's a lot going on, and assumptions are made that things are still the same, but it's been a while. And maybe you're wanting different things that you haven't even talked about in a while. So having these conversations prior to retirement can be so helpful to kind of avoid big surprises and disappointments that could come.
I could share a story. Somebody that I know recently, she was married to her spouse who was 6 years older, and he's been retired for about 5 years now. She started a new job, cutting back to part-time, but knowing she didn't want to work. And they were able to surprisingly fulfill a goal that they had had together, getting a vacation home at the beach. And this was several states away. This was down in North Carolina. And they went down, had a 2-week session, just enjoyed their time, a vacation. And the husband decided that he wanted to retire completely, wanted her to retire, and they were just going to move and live down there 6 months out of the year. That totally shook her up because she just started a new job and was planning to continue working part-time. And so they had a little bit of friction until they figured out how they would be able to make it work.
Yeah, that's a big change for everybody involved.
Mm-hmm.
So any thoughts on this one? Has anyone experienced some of this or come up with good strategies for making sure that communication is clear before that transition into retirement?
I think that's the key word, Michelle, is communication.
Yeah.
Just staying in touch with your spouse or significant other and really making sure you're still on the same track, because things change or things might come up that you hadn't even thought about. So it's really important just to keep your finger on the pulse of the other person, know what's important to you, know what's important to them, and figure out how to align them. And it may not be that we're always together all the time. It may be we go in and out and have the freedom to be able to do some of the things that we like to do that they may not.
If anything, I would say it's not a great idea to be together all the time. You want a little bit of together and a little bit of separate so that each kind of gives you the freedoms and stability that you want.
Yep.
We've talked about this before, but since, let me get my dates right. From 2000 to 2015, the divorce rate in people over 50 has escalated rapidly. And I've not seen exact statistics since, but there's some evidence that during the pandemic, this probably went up even more. And there can be lots and lots of reasons for this. But we propose that one piece of it is people reaching that point of retirement and realizing they've not stayed in lockstep and maybe not communicated clearly with one another. And it feels easier to go your separate ways. But I think we can both give so many stories of clients who have chosen that route, and it has complicated things tremendously in ways that they didn't anticipate. Relationships with friends, you know, and other families, it can get really difficult. Within your own family, can get really difficult. So we really strongly encourage people prior to retirement to have these conversations and kind of identify the differences and try to work through them ahead of time so that they don't reach that point of surprise of, wow, how did we get here and how did we end up on such different pages? Which kind of gets down to how much time should you be with just one or two other people? I'm looking back. So we had 22% with a spouse, another 22 with significant other, 44 with children or child, and about a third with a best friend. So how should you navigate that? What does anybody have what they would suggest as the right recipe of togetherness time versus some independent interest time?
One of the things we talked about, Michelle, was creating that village, that safety net that is kind of a robust version of our support network. And if you're narrowing it down to one person, you're limiting your options and limiting your support. And you know, it's very healthy and very normal to have lots of different relationships. It may be with that person and other people, or it may be without the significant other and other people. So it could be either way that you want to do it, but it's important because we know that there are always things that are not anticipated, and we have the death of the one person that we've been with and don't have other people in our network. It really makes it difficult, really hard to come out of that transition. So it's important to have friends and all different levels of friendship to be healthy.
It's true. I'm having a follow-up conversation with somebody this week who is a very, very successful and very private person. And we realized that this person only speaks to their spouse. You know, anything that's really important, their own personal goals, fears, challenges, only their spouse. And so we're going through a difficult process of trying to figure out if your spouse can't be there, can you get to the point where you could be open and share with other people, so that you don't find yourself in an isolated position? And it's tough. This is such a private person. This has been a process to kind of get to that point of realizing you don't want to get yourself into a situation where you've got nobody else that you can lean on.
Always like to throw out there that there are professional options too for people who may not have that other person or would rather have sort of a business relationship, so to speak. It's a professional relationship with somebody that you can share. Psychologists and counselors and therapists have an agreement of confidentiality where they're not sharing outside of that. Sometimes that's just more comfortable for people rather than trying to hope that you can trust this other person in your network. So just like to throw that out because we don't like people to go unsupported.
It's a great point. And a little bit more on the humorous side, I think we all know people who are together all the time and they're just sort of, it's kind of arguing all the time. And boy, if either of them can find another hobby to get away from each other for a while, things get better for everybody that's around. So we want to avoid that situation. So thinking about part of the planning for retirement and relationships is, what do you want for yourself? You know, you've earned this. Retirement is a time when you've worked really hard. You set yourself up to have this time where you maybe a little more downtime, pursue new interests, use your skills in new ways. What are things that you want for yourself as a reward in this time? And what are the things that you've just really been hankering to do with somebody else that's special in your life? And does everybody have like a little bit of each kind of vision? Something that you want to do and something that you know, with this child or best friend or spouse that you're just really looking forward to doing, or maybe you're already retired and you're already living this. Anything anybody wants to share?
This is a great time to reevaluate your bucket list or add to it.
I'm curious, of the people that are on here, do you have a bucket list, or have you kind of started thinking about a bucket list? Those things that you just really want to do now that you're going to have the time and ability to do it. Jeff, just stop me as people have things to share. And again, you can come off of your microphone or unmute and just talk with us. We would love that. Prior to retirement is also a great time to enhance key relationships. If you've been following us for a while, you've heard me talk about that one of the tools we use that is very emotional for a lot of people is we go through in a typical week, with whom do you spend most of your time while you're still employed? And a lot of people find that between meetings and phone calls and back when the world was in the office, you know, talking to people in the hallway, those water cooler chats, maybe going out after work with a group from work, or maybe meeting for breakfast before the workday starts. There are a lot of hours every week that are spent with coworkers, and they're wonderful. But when you retire, and they haven't retired, then they're still having those same patterns day to day during the work week, and you're not. And so who are the people that you're going to be spending most of your time with upon retirement? And again, I've seen people get very emotional when they realize they're spending 60 hours a week with one group and a lot less with the people who are kind of their future people that they're going to be spending most of their time with. And because they've been so busy with the work relationships, there's not been so much communication and connection with the home relationships. And so they start to realize that this transition is even bigger than they'd realized. Anybody have any insights to share about that? I'm glad to see that we've got a mix of people that between spouses, children, and friends. Go ahead, Jeff.
I'm sorry, not related to that just yet, but going back to the bucket list, have somebody that says, never thought I would do it, but I'm going on a church pilgrimage to Ireland in the fall. It wasn't on my bucket list, but it is now.
Awesome.
Oh, that sounds wonderful. Never been there, but I think green when I think Ireland. Well, how about leisure time? When you retire, you're going to have more of this. How do you want to spend that leisure time? Which types of activities are you envisioning that you'll do?
These are also great things for the bucket list. You know, there's some big things on the bucket list, but there's some smaller things, some day-to-day things, or things that you've put off after many years of working, but you've always thought you'd get around to it someday. Well, the day is here. We can get around to it.
Some fun things that I've talked to people that they've taken up just recently as they have more time available to do that. One is doing agility training with their dog. And so they're having such a good time learning how to train their dog, but and to be able to be in these competitions, these agility competitions. And somebody else is taking their dog to like pet therapy training. And it's this whole university. They have to graduate all these different classes before they can be like a therapy pet in a nursing home or a hospital or someplace like that. And somebody else has taken up pickleball and is just having the best time. So it can be just about anything.
I have a retired
Yeah.
school teacher who is tutoring children and reading. So they pull them out of the class and work with them in the hallway, kind of give them extra skills to get back into the classroom.
I love that.
A couple comments here. We have, I am volunteering more now, and that is very rewarding. Spending more time with my grandchildren. And then other comments, gardening, organizing family pictures, having breakfast with my friends, seeing my cousins more.
Great. And those are all really simple things to do now that we have the time to do them.
We have a college friend who went and organized pictures and then was able to do the face identity and share with all of us, all of this college group, photos from way back up till current time of different times we've gotten together. It was, everybody benefited from that. This is what we'd highly recommend you not do. And I think if you've watched some of our webinars before, we've talked about this, but I want to put it in a little bit different context. This is before COVID. The average time people over 65 spent in front of the television was over 7 hours a day, which adds up to about 51 hours a week. That's just hard to even fathom. But it happens so easily. There's all these streaming shows. You can binge watch something for hours and hours and hours. And I will tell you that I think a lot of times people don't realize the ramifications of that. And so just this week was talking to someone who has to go in and have their carotid arteries surgically cleaned out. The blockage is so severe that they can't do where they go through the artery and they go up and they can kind of clean it out in a less invasive way. They're going to have to actually have surgery. And when you look at the risk factors for reaching a point of artery occlusion where you don't have good blood flow to the brain, this sedentary lifestyle is a huge part of that. It's also a huge component of back pain. So sitting too much makes your back hurt. It makes your core very weak, which is going to increase the risk of you hurting your back. When your back hurts, you're going to want to sit and not move, and it becomes this horrible, vicious cycle that's hard to break. And when you watch television all the time, you tend to not sleep as well. Your brain is just being stimulated in such different ways, but your body doesn't get tired. And then your memory and your mental acuity tend to decline as well. So the impact of too much television is really, really big, and I think people often don't recognize that. So encourage that not to be your only social activity or leisure activity. It's not a social activity. So we want
Question.
social engagement. Yes.
I have a question related to that. How many hours to watch is best now?
That's a great question. I don't know that there's an answer, but in general, guidelines are that probably no more than 2, maybe 3 hours on a day, so that most of your day you're up, you're active, you're engaged in other things.
And another question related to that comment. Since I live alone, the TV or radio is on a lot for background noise, but I'm not always watching. Is that okay?
I think that's different. As long as your body is moving and you're engaged in other things, I agree. It's not the same as sitting on the couch and binge watching television. But I understand the need for that little bit of noise and something
Company.
else going on. Yeah.
Okay. Thank you.
So Ellen mentioned middle school earlier. You know, it used to be the big thing to figure out if you, when you went to PE or even before that in elementary school, recess, who'd you hang out with? In high school, who are you going to hang out with after school? So now we ask you in this phase of life, when the primary career comes to an end or starts to wind down, who will you hang out with? Have you really given it a lot of thought? Your network can be so many different pieces and parts. I'm just going to go ahead and click all these clicks. You think about family, and again, some people talked about, you know, children and spouses being a big part of their network. Neighbors, friends, you can still stay connected to those professional people. It just looks different because you're not in the office together every day. When we think about friends, we encourage you to think about old friends and new friends, you know, as you continue to expand your social network. Family can be blood relatives and then adopted family, you know, people that you consider like family in your life. And then all the people you meet through doing things, the people that like to do those same sorts of things. So your network is somewhat built or pre-built at the time of retirement, but then there are all of these opportunities to further expand it. Anything you want to add here, Ellen?
No, I think just putting on your creative thinking caps of ways to connect with different people, whether it's, you know, hosting a potluck or doing a block party or reconnecting. I'll give you an example. My father started working on alumni events for both his high school and his college. He's now 87, but he started doing that probably in his 70s, and he's reconnected with people that he knew back then, or maybe knew but really didn't hang out with, and now they're working together on committees together, and they've stayed connected, and they have that connection through their school. So there's lots of ways to do it. It's just a little effort and being creative, finding ways to meet people who are like-minded.
I like that. Anything new in the chat, Jeff?
Not just yet. We'll definitely let you know.
Okay. So we've used this word a few times, affinity groups. And Ellen, I love when you use this word. What does that mean to you?
So affinity groups can really be almost anything that you can think of. It can be a club, it could be a hobby, it could be gender identity. It could be almost anything you could possibly think of. And there are many groups on social media that if you wanted to find them, you could. Sometimes libraries or even retirement communities have affinity groups within them. So it's clubs that you might find through the local senior center. It might be through lifelong learning, like Osher lifelong learning groups through universities. They have courses where you can start to meet people with similar ideas and similar interests and hobbies. So there's really anything. It's just when people find, you kind of draw together with somebody who has something in common. So it's finding those threads of commonality to create an affinity groups.
Two just popped in my head that I feel like I want to share. One is somebody who had always wanted to learn more about makeup and hair. And so she's taken these classes at the community college on makeup and hair. And she started with makeup, like beautifying makeup. And now she's doing like movie makeup. So she'll have these pictures where it looks like she has this big gash on her cheek, but she's having the best time learning how to do this. And it just, so it can be so many different things. Think about what I've always thought would be fun to do.
Going back to that social network, somebody says one of my friends is from grade school and we still get together once a month at McDonald's.
Oh, that's a long-term relationship. Very nice. We've talked about most of these. A fun place to find other people is this Meetup, which is an app, if you want to check that out. I mean, you can say, I don't know, come up with something completely crazy. I like black and white artwork. And you can find people that have similar interests. And so it's a fun place to find people in your community that you wouldn't otherwise meet. And now you've got this thing that you like to do together and talk about and go explore. I've got several friends who are parts of travel groups, especially who are single. And travel groups are a way to go explore places they want to go with some ability to meet a lot of new people and some security that you're not traveling truly alone. And I think we've seen repeatedly that if the activities you do also positively impact and help other people, everybody really benefits. Even more so than when we do things just for ourselves. When we're doing things that include or help others, we all just get so much more joy out of that. So has this stimulated any new relationship building kinds of ideas for anybody? I'll keep going. How might your lifestyle change? I mean, certainly it's going to change. You don't have to get up and be in your work clothes and out the door by 7:15 or whatever your pattern was. And so you've got these wide open days in front of you, so many ways that you can spend and fill them. And I could give you numerous stories of people who thought they had it figured out, but their plans only really worked for maybe 2 or 3 or as much as 6 weeks. And then they realized that their plan really had no depth. You know, sleeping in, spending more time in the yard, planting a new garden, that kind of stuff was more short term than they realized. And pretty soon they were out of their task list and looking for something else. And that's a great time to turn to this relationship part. Who can you do some more things with?
I've met a local woman who has created a social app that you can put on your phone. It's called Mixolo, Mixollo, Solo, Mixolo. And it is a way for you, it's not a dating app, it's not a couples app, it is for that single person who wants to find like-minded people to go to the theater with, or to go to a cooking class with, or whatever. So you can go in there and look at all those affinity groups and clubs and outings. You could create your own and invite others. But again, it's kind of a safe way to be able to go out and do something social publicly with some people who may have similar interests. So MIXOLO.
Mixolo. That's really fun. And you say somebody local came up with that?
Yep. She created it, and it's expanding. They kind of put things on hold with COVID because people weren't doing engagements and in-person visits. But it looks like they're opening up in 23 and ready to go again. So that might be something people want to check out.
Yeah, I don't know. It's especially fun that it's somebody local came up with it. We already kind of talked about this, but household tasks will change once people who have been working all the time are now home. How can you do that in a way that benefits everybody? No one person feels like they're getting the brunt of the work. So these are good things, just simple things to talk about ahead of time. And then
Michelle,
yeah.
I'm sorry, actually, Ellen, could you give that Mixolo information again and where to find that app for one of our attendees, please?
Sure. Yep.
Is it mixolo.com or .org?
.com.
So MIXOLO.
Okay, I apologize. It's MIXOLO.io.
Oh.
I-L?
I-O.
I-O, I'm sorry, okay.
Yep.
I'll include that in the follow-up message I send out. Try to get to that this afternoon for everybody. Thank you.
That's really fun. The poll at the beginning kind of talked about who do you see as your primary relationship, and you probably have other really close relationships. We highly encourage you to have at least one person who can be your advocate, who really knows you. Now, part of that is if you're in a situation where something happens and you can't speak for yourself, this person can answer all those questions about your medical history and your medications and substances and your daily habits and who's your lawyer and who's your doctor and that kind of thing. So you want somebody who knows those things, but boy, it'd be great if they also know just your likes and your dislikes and what do you want out of life, so that while you temporarily can't make decisions, any decisions being made about you reflect who you are and what you would pick if you were able to do it.
And this really goes back to what we were talking about earlier, Michelle, about the communication piece and really communicating your needs, but understanding your significant other's needs or your spouse's needs, so that if you had to take that role for them, you'd be able to, you'd be prepared.
Yeah. I mean, we've heard of stories of somebody's got a caregiver and they play all the wrong music, like the music that they just absolutely can't stand, or they talk down to them and they just can't stand that. They want to be spoken to, you know, in a professional way, or they just touch them in ways that drive them crazy and they would rather be cared for in a different way. So having people that really know you and can make sure that anything that's done on your behalf reflects who you are really makes everything better over time. My dad had a tree fall on his head, and we had to learn this the hard way, that for about 4 months he was limited what he could do for himself, and we stumbled a few times and made some choices that he didn't like so much, that could have been better. He's doing great now, by the way. It's been a few years. And then do you anticipate, or this could happen even if you don't anticipate, that the time will come when you're playing a caregiver role? either to a spouse, to a good friend, to another family member, to a neighbor, or to your grandchildren, similar to the people I talked about earlier, where she became the caregiver during the week. And Ellen, this is very much your area. Well, how would you encourage people to be prepared for potentially playing that role in that kind of relationship?
Yeah, one of the biggest things that you can do, and the best gifts that you can give your family members, is really spelling out what your wishes are. And that's in terms of who is going to be the person to make financial decisions for you or healthcare decisions for you in the event you're not able to, but also things like the MOLST form, Maryland Orders for Life-Sustaining Treatment, or advanced directives that really spell out what kind of treatment you want or don't want. And that might be medical treatment, or it might be even, like you mentioned, Michelle, the preference in music that you want to have played, or quiet time, or a special blanket, or whatever it might be, food, drink, whatever it might be. And it's really important to get that and officially in a document. And I'm sure Jeff and Elville can talk about that, because they do a lot of that. But it really is important to have those documents ahead of time, have it down and share it with the people who are making decisions, so that they have it, and maybe even have some of those difficult conversations. It gets more into the nitty-gritty of what your preferences are. But this is a great way to communicate it, but it's also a great way to document it, so that if somebody else happens across the documents, or the primary care physician needs those documents, you have a vehicle to get it to them along with the instructions. So it's kind of like your care manual going forward, but really needs to be documented before there's a crisis and while you're capable of making those decisions. So I urge everyone to do that. Empower yourself to make the decisions while you can, and find the people that you trust who's going to uphold those wishes for you.
So important. And like you say, Elville, you're in great hands to guide you through that, from the legal documents and really thinking this through and having all of those plans in place.
Ellen, I'm going to put you on the front of our website. Couldn't agree more. That's so very true. Very true.
And I want to pick on my mom for a second. Every time I bring up these things, she goes, "Oh, I'm not old enough. I don't need that yet." It's not an age thing. We
If you
just
have
don't
children,
know.
you need it, no matter what.
I'm sorry, go ahead, Ellen.
I was saying, if you have children, you need it, no matter what age. Once you have children, you need to put that kind of stuff in writing.
Right. Yeah, but my dad had a tree fall on his head. No one expected that, and it wasn't at a time when anyone had planned. So you just don't know. So excellent. Self-care, we've talked about this many times before, but when you find yourself in a caregiver role, self-care is so especially important, because it can be so taxing to be a caregiver. So just we've talked about each of these things, but making sure you get plenty of movement during the day, that you know how to resolve some stress and relax. We've through these webinars, we've been through so many different strategies for that. Talked about music. Music can pick you up and get you excited, and music can really calm you down at the end of the day or when you need to relax. Knowing how to manage conflict, having a good support network, all of these things are so important to your overall health. And when you've taken these steps to care for yourself, you're really better able to be in relationship with other people as well. You're not going to be quite as stressed out and anxious if we do some good self-care. And I always talk about this, but man, at the core of your health is your sleep. And so we've got documents that help provide you with sleep tips. Just let us know if you'd like those. Actually, we have a document that Jeff will send out in a little bit. It's just kind of a reminder of some of these elements of surrounding yourself with really rock solid relationships. We want to make sure that you have that as well. So I ran us out of time. Next month, we're talking about your personal risk factors. How do you know what are the things that are most likely to cause you to have some sort of health decline. And if we know what they are, then we can take steps to minimize those. So be sure to join us next month for that. And as always, we invite you to come check out Propel. This is done on your own time. You get just a few short videos and a workbook every month, but it all builds to create this really robust retirement plan where you avoid all the pitfalls that we talk about in each of these months. So I don't know if we have an extra minute or two, but Jeff, we're so grateful to be here. And I'm sorry I ran us out of time.
Oh, no, we always got plenty of time for you, Michelle and Ellen. We're just so grateful for the thought and the time that you put into these presentations, and information is just invaluable. And want to thank you for being here today, as always. And already looking forward to next month. That's going to be on Tuesday, the 21st, for everybody that's interested. And I'll send out the link to register for that. We are a little bit over, but that's okay. I've got nowhere to go. I will send out today's video if you want to share it with any friends or family, as well as today's slides. And I'll send out some information that we share with our clients about MOLST, which is very important, something that you want to learn about. And we share some information with our clients about MOLST, which is medical orders for life-sustaining treatments. So I'll send some information out about that. And our webinar series is going to keep me very busy for the next month or so. I won't list what's coming up. I'll send out some information in the email follow-up that I'll send out later today, or the very latest first thing tomorrow morning. And again, the 21st, next Tuesday, the 21st, February 21st, is when our personal risk factors, how to determine yours and ways to minimize them, is coming up. So look forward to seeing you then, and thank you very much for being part of our Elville webinar series. Thanks again to Ellen and Michelle.
Thank you, Jeff.
Thank you.